Hello and welcome to the Back Nine Report. My name is Carlos Torres, along with Altvater. We check in on the world of golf to bring you the latest news, insights, analysis, interviews, recaps, previews. Hey, we cover anything and everything golf. In other words, if it happened in golf, we have it for you. But this week, we have a lot of things going on, and one of them is the LIV Golf debut that happened this weekend. So we have to bring in the reinforcements because these are big news this week. So Fred, we're bringing in the European golf guru, Kieran Clark. So I'm going to bring in first. Hi, Kieran. Welcome back. How are you today?
Well, thank you for the welcome there from Fred in the background. But yeah, it's great to be here. Obviously, as always, join you guys tonight to talk about, really a storm has hit professional golf with LIV Golf coming on and onto the scene. Finally, it became a reality. Obviously, really 2 years of talk and controversy and speculation, and then it became a reality for what it's worth. But it's certainly very, very real. And I say that storm has hit the game. We're very much in the midst of that right now. I think at this moment we're waiting for the dust to clear after that storm, and then we can really see what the landscape is, and then how the game evolves and rebuilds around all this new reality. But make no mistake, and we'll talk about this tonight here, is that things have changed dramatically in men's professional golf, and it really could take years before it calms down. So the challenge for us in this show now is to try and answer some questions which right now are probably unanswerable, but we love a challenge, don't we? So let's get to it.
We do, and definitely that's why we need all three of us to try to figure out something that nobody has able to be figuring out yet. So, but anyway, we have questions and we have some answers. Hopefully, you will agree, and if not, it's great. We like that as well. So, Fred, Kieran mentioned, a storm. I think it's like a tornado, right? To really know what the effects are and the category, you have to go afterwards and see what the damage was. But we're going to talk about that. But first of all, how are you today?
Hey, Carlos, fantastic. We were talking before we went on air that it's like there's nothing else going on. It's like the LIV tournament in London was the only thing happening in golf. Do you realize the RBC Canadian Open was going on? And it had a fantastic finish with Rory and with JT and with Tony Finau in the final group. They all shot like low 60s. It was fantastic stuff. The ShopRite Classic was going on, and the Curtis Cup was going on. But the Curtis Cup got no press. I mean, no media coverage at all. I mean, you had to really look for it to find it. I didn't even watch 1 minute of it, which is really unusual because I love to watch that. So yeah, it was quite a weekend. We've been talking about this, talking about the LIV, and here it is now. We've got it, and we've got more stuff even coming down the road, Carlos.
It does, and in a couple of weeks we're going to see that. But let's first get some first impressions about this first leg there in London. Kieran, Charles Schwartzel won. Of course, there's a lot of talk about the field. They said an exhibition, but what do you think about this first tournament? That team format, finally, we see it. He won over $4 million. I mean, that's unheard of. The guy that finished last, $120,000, that is a good payment for the top 20 in the PGA Tour. So how about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to quickly mention, though, in terms of other events last weekend, we have to mention quickly Lynn Grant winning the Scandinavian Mixed on the European Tour.
That's right. I'm sorry. I meant to put that down.
The first woman to win on the DP World Tour. An astonishing 9-shot win there. An amazing performance, a superstar performance that really validates the idea of having mixed fields in future. So hopefully we see more. Whatever happens with LIV Golf and European Tour and the PGA Tour and the LPGA in the future, let's hope we see more men and women competing in that environment, because that was a fabulous victory. What a performance. And really it was kind of golf at its best, as was the Canadian Open. But on the first of the exhibition events, if you like, at the LIV Golf just outside London at the Centurion Club, I think it was really, it confirmed what we already kind of knew and suspected, really, that it was a very surreal week. The build up to it was actually more interesting than the actual golf. The press conferences, seeing Phil Mickelson emerge from the shadows again, and all the players having to face the difficult questions and then dealing with them in a really questionable manner at times. So that was what we kind of suspected was going to be the case. Really, the golf itself didn't really matter as such. It was just kind of getting out there and getting that first event on record. And the winner, Charles Schwartzel winning that was obviously, great for him. It validates his decision because he's picked up a huge check for someone whose career has really been on the slide for a while now. And that kind of confirmed the perception of it was, for the most part at the moment, it's guys who are kind of dwindling a little bit, struggling a little bit, having huge paydays. And we saw the contrast of that versus the Canadian Open. We saw, the best players in the world going head to head in a fabulous atmosphere, playing fantastic golf. So the battle lines are being confirmed again. We kind of know where we are now, where the guys who are into the legacy and the history and the achievements of winning on the PGA Tour, they're content where they are right now. The likes of Rory McIlroy and Justin Thomas, who became almost like the spokespeople for the PGA Tour last week. And on the other side, you have the kind of the soulless money grab that was the first LIV Golf event. Ultimately, that it'll certainly evolve going forward. The LIV Golf, the team format, that doesn't really make much sense. The teams had staggeringly ridiculous names that are very hard to remember, and who knows what they were all about. I think school children could have come up with better names for the teams than what they had there. I found the whole thing really unedifying and quite ugly. Just the soulless nature of it, and these guys just trying to justify what they were doing. And I'm not going to criticize them individually for what they're doing, because everyone's entitled to do what they want to do. But for me, the biggest thing about it was the sporting aspect of it. We can get into the morality of it. We can get into what it means in the Saudi Arabian money, and whether that's moral or not, and whether it's sports washing and all these different things. But for me, the bigger question going forward, and probably the most relevant one when it comes to the future landscape of the game, is from a sheer sport perspective. I think the LIV Golf format is lacking in terms of the shotgun starts and the 54 holes, the guaranteed money. I think all of
It's
that.
Something golf has never been seen before. It's the greatest thing going, Kieran.
Well, that's it. Yeah, the innovation, the great innovation, and that's what they gave us. So certainly this thing is going to have to evolve going forward if it wants to get anywhere, beyond just being this kind of rather drab and soulless money grab is what it is. But yeah, for me, it's a case of right now, this is like day one of this new reality, and it's going to take, I think, years to finally settle down. This is going to go on and on, because ultimately these guys have incredibly deep pockets. I mean, not very many startup companies can literally put in $500 million to form a mediocre golf field. I mean, that's just, you can't compete with that financially. So the question for the PGA Tour and the rest of the game is, how do you respond to this? And I think these questions are going to take a very, very long time to answer. But as I said at the start of the show, the storm has hit, and we're in that whirlwind right now. And when dust clears, I mean, I think there's going to be some wreckage, and things are going to change, that's for sure.
Right. What's your first impression on this result first?
Well, to answer Kieran there, there's going to be wreckage, but what's going to happen down the road? Oh my goodness, who knows? It's but it looks to me like the LIV is here to stay. Like he said, $500 billion or 500, that's just unbelievable. $500 million to put into this thing, it's unbelievable to throw at these guys, and what they're paying these guys, it's unreal. So, Charles Schwartzel won. He made a cool $4 million for winning. Plus, he got another $750,000 to be on the winning team that last week. So 4.75, that's what like winning 3 weeks on the PGA Tour is. So guys got to be looking at that. I mean, they have to be. Who was a factor? Well, Charles pretty much dominated from start to finish. I'll tell you who wasn't a factor. Dustin Johnson finished 8th, right? GMAC 10th, Sergio 22nd, and Phil, a cool T33 coming back. He tied with Chase Koepka and a couple other no names. So good week, Phil, out there in London. Here's a popular name. It's on everybody's lips, right? Henny Duplessis earned $2.2 million for finishing runner-up. That's 2 weeks on the PGA Tour if you win, okay? He gets runner-up, he gets 2.2. You think some of the other guys aren't watching this? You know they are. Brandon Grace got 1.5 million, finishing third. You know, the LIV is the actual land of milk and honey. This is, I mean, this is the yellow brick road. We've found nirvana here with the LIV. They just have so many deep pockets. The guy that, you know, I just most surprised, James Pyatt, our guy from Michigan here, he tied for 25th, earned 163,000, but he's got the $6 million in his pocket that they guaranteed him. So, and DJ said it best, it's all about fewer tournaments for more money. He can still play in the majors, less work, more pay. Who doesn't want that, guys? Who doesn't want that?
Of course, and reality is, because I know that the big thing that everybody's trying to make out of this is the morality of where the money comes from. It's not really the golf that is being criticized. It's really where the money's coming from. If it would be any other place, we wouldn't have been talking about this. There would be a lot of more players there. But the truth is, and they call them sellouts and all this, and that's where I have some reservations with, because you have to see where you see other sports and you go for the LeBron James, they pay him, oh, I'm going to go to the max. He's not going to say, you know what, no, don't worry. I'm not here for the money, so don't pay me the max. I'm not going for the contract. That happens in football, everywhere else. The players are here to make money. They're not here to do anything else. That's their job. And in your job, you want to earn the most money that you can. So the problem really is the morality in this. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But really, we have to see if right now it is here and how does it build? Because really, we see that monopolies are the ones that really always take all the earnings. But now there's LIV, the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour have competition, or do we call the LIV competition, or is it not? And I'm going to give you the first crack at it, Fred.
Well, yes, the LIV is a serious competitor, no question about it, to the PGA Tour. And I really believe the DP World Tour is the one that's going to get squeezed out here. They're going to become a minor tour, because you just see the major guys, the major players originally from the DP World Tour that anchor their big events are now playing on the LIV series. So it's just going to be younger guys and guys working their way up to try to get to the PGA Tour or get noticed enough to get onto the LIV Tour. So yeah, it's a tremendous competitor and it's here to stay.
How about you, Kieran? What's your thought on the competition? Is it a true competitor?
Well, it has to be, because, as I said earlier, I mean, any venture that can come onto the scene and spend, potentially billions of dollars from the get-go with no real sign of any sort of financial return, no television contracts, no major sponsorships. They're coming on with this essentially backed by a nation state and a bottomless pit of money. That has to be a competitor, because no functioning sports league like the PGA Tour is, despite being a huge sports league with over $1 billion of revenue each year, you cannot compete financially with this juggernaut that is the LIV Golf. So it has to be seen as a serious competitor to the PGA Tour for that very reason, in that it has got some star name players and it will remain a draw for star name players going forward, because the money is just that extraordinary. And that in itself is something that you can't overcome, and it's a reality. Whether you talk about the moral side of it or whatever, and where the money's come from, and again, the merits of the whole thing as a sporting venture. Is it just a glorified exhibition, which I think it ultimately is, and certainly in its current setup and what seems to be the case going forward, it is just a glorified exhibition, but one that makes a lot of money for these players, and that's, for a lot of these guys, it's all they're really interested in. And Fred touched on the DP World Tour, the European Tour. What happens with it? And of course, it's well known that the Saudis tried to get involved with the DP World Tour a few years ago, and that ultimately led to the strategic alliance between the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour. And that places the DP World Tour in a really awkward position where they haven't yet responded on how they're going to act. As we know, the PGA Tour came out with the fists clenched and suspended all the players who were involved in the first event. The DP World Tour hasn't made that proclamation themselves yet, because they're not really too sure how they're going to respond to this. It places them in, on one hand, you can say, well, maybe the DP World Tour could actually welcome the likes of Phil Mickelson and welcome the likes of Dustin Johnson to play in their events as well as LIV Golf, therefore giving the guys world ranking points and giving them some kind of standing in the established game. That could be great for them. But the trouble is that alliance with the PGA Tour, what does that entail? What contracts were signed? And we know coming up in just a few weeks' time, we have the Scottish Open, where it's a co-sanctioned event between the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, and a lot of the top American players are playing in that before the Open Championship. So I can't see the DP World Tour doing too much before then. They're undecided as it stands right now with how they respond to that. So they're in a really awkward position, and one that is a major threat to them. Not just because you have this huge series of events here, but also because you have the Saudi money as well backing the Asian Tour, which of course actually held an event in England the week before the first event at Centurion. So the Asian Tour now has presence in Europe with the Saudi Arabian money backing them up as well. And the Asian Tour, certainly from what I understand, is going to ultimately be the feeding ground. The big criticism of this series is, of course, it's not a meritocracy. There's not that degree of players coming up and getting tour cards and earning their status on the tour. But the Asian Tour will be that pathway to get new players in to the elite 48-man field. And that's going to be the future. I think it's going to be 4 or 5 players each year will be promoted from the Asian Tour to the 48-man field, and then 5 guys will fall off that field back onto the Asian Tour. And that will be the pathway to get guys into that, and potentially the way to actually get these players world ranking points and remain relevant for the major championships and so on. So the DP World Tour, it's a major threat. And for the PGA Tour as well, it's a huge thing, because I don't care, whatever Jay Monahan says about the morality of it all, and the guys have turned their back on the PGA Tour, it's made them millions, and you can certainly say that you can criticize all these players for that, and much of it is justified. I mean, Phil Mickelson, couldn't look any worse than what he does right now. I mean, a guy that's squandered literally hundreds of millions of dollars on gambling, is taking literally hundreds of millions of from these guys as well, and just it's trying to justify that. It's just a very ugly, unedifying scene. But the PGA Tour has to respond to this, because they can't just sit back and think, right, we'll ban these guys and then that'll be it, and we'll try and portray ourselves as being the good guys in this fight, because in the end there's no good guys and bad guys. The world's much more complicated than that, especially when you're talking about this money that's involved. So it is a major threat to the PGA Tour going forward, because ultimately, if more top players join the LIV Golf Series, become part of potentially the Asian Tour as well, then it dilutes the game at the highest level. And what's made the PGA Tour in the past few decades has been, for the most part, they have got the best players in the world playing week in, week out on the tour. And if that becomes diluted, where you only have maybe half the best players, maybe half the big names start playing elsewhere, it becomes harder for the PGA Tour to justify the huge purses, huge TV contracts, huge sponsorships. It becomes less attractive, where it's not the place to play, it just becomes one of the places to play. So that is a PGA Tour is not going to disappear, but neither is the LIV Golf either. They're both going to exist in this new landscape, and how they eventually somehow get round each other, it remains to be seen. So I see it as being a dilution of the game at the highest level, which I don't think in the long run benefits anyone. And that's why I think ultimately it's a very sad situation, because I don't see the benefit for the golf fan, for the viewer. I don't see it. To me, I see Rory McIlroy and Justin Thomas playing in Canada. Fantastic, that's great. But what if 5 or 6 of the world's top 20 start playing elsewhere consistently? Then you see the world's best players together less often than what you do now. Which
does it make it? Wouldn't that make it better though? It's like kind of like the Ryder Cup comes together every couple of years. These guys all don't get together all the time, and so now that maybe make the majors even better if they aren't out there banging heads week after week.
Well, that's a key point, Fred. Is the one thing that has happened through all this is that the major championships are even stronger than before, because right now they're thinking, well, eventually it could get to the stage where the 4 majors are really the 4 times of the year you actually do get everyone in one place together, which is oddly enough, great news for the RNA, the USGA, the Masters, the PGA of America. And of course, yes, while they generally speaking will go along with the establishment, for them, the PGA Tour is just a tour, the big tour, but they are their own organizations and they'll do what's best for them. So while it makes the 4 majors, I think, stronger than before, potentially, to be beyond that, it just means that you have, a dilution of the game and the top players playing each other less often, more frequent, less often. And that, I don't see the benefit of that week in, week out for golf on television. It will make the major stronger. It doesn't make the everyday week of the year stronger. I don't think it does.
We've got an example of that, Kieran. I mean, you've got it right there on the DP World Tour. And we talked about this a long time ago, that with the Rolex Series, you have 2 DP World Tours. You have those 8 events where the big guys play, and then you got the other 30 events or whatever there are that just the run-of-the-mill European Tour players play, and the big names all go back to America and play. So,
and I think
we've got a prime example of that.
Of course, and people would actually, I think, almost rightly say, is that this upheaval of the game is just doing to the PGA Tour what the PGA Tour has done to the rest of the world over the past 20, 30 years. And take all the best players and have them in one country predominantly and playing there and having all the big money and making it very difficult for life elsewhere. Because in the last few years, and certainly it's been even more dramatically apparent in the pandemic era, is that for events in Australia and throughout Asia and Southern Africa, it's been harder for them to put on tournaments and for professional golfers in those parts of the world to earn decent money, because the big money is in America, it's not elsewhere, and the money's got tighter in the past few years, obviously because of the major events that have happened, and that will only continue going forward, I suspect, given the whole cost of living crisis is happening all across the planet right now. So it becomes a major problem for the PGA Tour. And you mentioned the Rolex Series events. The Rolex Series is obviously a response by the European Tour, the DP World Tour, to try and get the best players as often as they can to play on their circuit, while also conceding that ultimately they will play mostly in America. Now, maybe in the future, years down the line, we see the PGA Tour become like that, almost where there's an elite series of events on the PGA Tour, where there is almost room for both, where the guys that play in LIV Golf, they can also play in these big elite PGA Tour events, and also vice versa. But again, that's so far down the road. Right now, you're in this kind of emotional thing where Jay Monahan appeared on television at the Canadian Open on Sunday, and he almost appeared like he was like indignant and offended, and we couldn't believe what these guys were doing. They left him, and there was a real kind of emotion to what he was saying, and it almost feels like the PGA Tour had been kind of blindsided by all this, and they kind of thought it was going to go away, but it just hasn't. It never was going to. With this backing behind it, it was always going to be there. So when kind of the emotions calm down, and then they realise ultimately it's not good for anyone if half the best players are playing over there and we're never going to let them play in our events again. That doesn't seem long term to be healthy for either the PGA Tour or indeed LIV Golf, because they want to have top guys playing in their events. So yeah, it's just, I say these are all unanswered questions, and I think it'll take a while for the answers to come, because when the LIV Golf becomes more established, when we go into next year and have more events, more guys will join them. There's a new reality in the game right now, and the PGA Tour can't just rest on what it has and just assume that will be enough. They have to respond with what they do, whether it's innovate the events they put on, try and create fewer events on the schedule, bigger events. But the big criticism is, of course, is the PGA Tour schedule is obviously very long. There's events every single week. They all kind of roll into one. The guys have to play throughout the entire year. There's no real off season. And the top players don't want to do that. They want to earn the big money, but play fewer events. Can the PGA Tour try and accommodate that going forward while still offering a pathway for young players going forward? That's a big question for them. And I think actually the bigger issue for the PGA Tour, and it's something not many folk have really discussed actually, it's not really about whether LIV Golf comes in and offers 100 million to this guy or 200 million to that guy. It's about the players of the future. Does the LIV Golf, do they target the players coming out of college, target the top amateur golfers and say, right, when you turn pro, we'll give you this contract here. Come and play with us. Don't go and play PGA Tour. Don't try and come through the Corn Ferry and try and get a tour card and all that stuff. Actually come and join us for guaranteed money. So it's not just about having the stars of today on the PGA Tour, it's where are the stars of tomorrow going to go? And that, I think, is a bigger problem for the PGA Tour they have to respond to, where they have to ensure that the pathways from the college and amateur system through the Corn Ferry Tour onto the PGA Tour are much more seamless. And I remember an interview that was done over a decade ago with Lee Trevino, and he made this exact point, where for him, it made no sense that on the PGA Tour, they had 125 tour card holders all the time. You know, what were the guys ranked 100 to 125 really offering the tour, apart from blocking the next generation of getting onto the tour? You're giving these guys tour cards that aren't really contributing very much in terms of winning events, or even no one knows who they are. They're kind of journeyman pros making a good living for themselves, which is fine. But you're almost ensuring that the next generation of young golfer are going to be on the lower tour, which is harder financially. It's tougher for them to thrive and get onto the main circuit. The likes of Morikawa, they're exceptions. It's very rare. Most golfers have got to grow through this kind of difficult route to get to the PGA Tour and try and stay there. And it's hard to get there. And the LIV Golf can offer an easier route in the future. And that is something the PGA Tour has to evolve. They have to become younger, ensure that the young players get onto the tour, be dynamic. And dynamism is not something that's really associated with the PGA Tour, which has become stale. They've been quite content with what they have because they've had no competition. This thing has just come in and completely blown all that apart. And they have to respond not just with the moral question, not just with the sport question of, it's an exhibition and whatever else. They have to respond themselves and to become a better product. Because if they don't, then whether you like LIV Golf or not, or whether you're offended by the Saudi money, whether you hate all that stuff, it's there and it's going to stay there. And the PGA Tour has to adjust to that new reality.
So, wow, I don't know what else we can say after that. But anyway,
I'm going to lie down now. Thank you.
So, okay, no, you touched a lot of things. I don't even know if I can respond to all of them. But anyway, let's keep. This is a big subject, but let's keep going. And Fred, one of the things that happened is that, of course, all the players that are from the PGA Tour playing there have been banned. Okay, including DJ and Phil, which have over 20 tour victories. They have lifetime exemptions. So there's two things that come to mind. Is it really correct for Jay Monahan what he did about banning these players from playing in the PGA Tour? And can he actually keep DJ and Phil from playing? I mean, I heard Phil today in his quick conference today saying, doing the right things and saying, I hope I can make some more memories. He was really, it seems like he had it, everything is scripted. But what do you think? I mean, we know this is going to go to the courts for sure, because this is going to change somehow. Was it right to ban them? And can he keep them out of the tour?
I really don't think he can keep them out, especially Phil and DJ, who have earned the right to play in any tournament on the PGA Tour that they put up. They have 20 wins. I think DJ isn't quite old enough yet. I think he's got another year or something to wait till he hits the age limit, but he does have over 20 wins. So, I don't think that Jay can back that up. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a lawsuit. Banning players, I don't think that really helps Jay. I really don't think it helps the PGA Tour, because just like we heard Kieran saying, it hasn't worked for the DP World Tour. It just hasn't worked other places. So I do have a couple of things I want to add to what Kieran was saying. One is this idea of no major sponsor just yet, just the Saudi money. I really think I will be surprised if a couple of large Asian companies or a large European company doesn't come in like a FedEx Cup kind of thing and put a bunch of money into the LIV. They've got a product now. They've proved it. They've had a tournament. Another week or two down the road, I think that we will see an announcement for some kind of major sponsorship. maybe 2 or 3, not just one maybe. And the other thing is, I really think now that people want to see this. They're going to want to see this. So some network is going to pick it up, whether it's Fox or whether it's some Asian network or something. We didn't know anything about Sky Sports until they really started covering golf a lot more. And now Sky Sports is a common name. So there's got to be an Asian company or an Australian company or someplace else that wants in on this kind of thing. Maybe even somebody from Russia. I don't know, but somebody that wants in on this thing that will do it. We'll put up the money, or we'll do what it takes to get this done. My question, I still don't understand, why don't they have official world golf ranking points? I mean, why? I mean, there's definitely world players there. They could make the calculation. They know how to do it for the Korn Ferry Tour, for the DP World Tour, for the PGA, for all these other tours. They offer ranking points. Why aren't they doing it for the LIV? Is it because the PGA Tour and the Americans control it? They're too strong with it, so they're keeping everybody, the LIV, out of it. I think they're going to have to. I think the OWGR is going to have to give world ranking points, I think. So, and then one more point, Kieran touched on this, talking about Lee Trevino and the minor tours. I've said for a long time that they're giving too much money to the PGA Tour players, and they should be taking some of that money and putting it down on the Korn Ferry Tour, or maybe down on the Mackenzie Tour in Canada, or maybe the South American or even the China Tour. They got way too much concentration of money at the top and not enough in the feeder tours coming up. It's really tough for those guys to get along. So that's the point that Kieran made, that these guys can jump right in. We just saw James Piot jump right in and make $6 million. He can't make that in 5 years on the PGA Tour. There's no way he could make that, probably, because he's going to spend a couple years on the Korn Ferry Tour before he even gets to the PGA Tour, because he's not ready to play. So that's the things I wanted to say, Carlos.
Yeah, so the official world golf rankings, that was one thing that a lot of people were trying to talk about, why they're not getting it, right? But for what I read is that they are just gonna officially do it soon. They're just maybe letting it for the beginning of this few tournaments, see how is it gonna be organized and all that. But they are going to be receiving eventually some official world golf ranking points, which makes it more difficult for the PGA Tour to try to keep banning these players. Because another thing to mention up to what Kieran was saying, the DP World Tour has been really, really silent on what they're going to do with the players. And that speaks volumes to me more than really, because they do have the alliance with the PGA Tour right now. But if they would be really on the same page, they would have been like, no, you're also banned. You're gone and you're not doing that. They know they're the ones that have the most to lose by doing that, because already their top players are in the PGA Tour. And then if you're going to say to your top players here, you can't go there, who are they going to have? They are really not going to have any product. So I actually think, just to go quickly over this, things are going to point more and more to that elite world tour that we have been talking about eventually, and having feeder tours to this big world tour.
If they would just call us, we could fix them up. We know what to do.
We have it planned, we have it mapped, it's already done. We just have to sit down. But anyway,
and we'll do it on the cheap. We'll do it for a couple $1 million.
It won't cost that much.
Speak for yourself, Fred. I want more than that.
You can always start high, guys. You can always come down. You start high and come down. Negotiate.
We do. And let's talk a little bit about the morality now of this thing, right? Because and I saw that Terry Strata letter to the players, like Phil Mickelson and all that. They're bringing the 9/11 into this, and all about the Saudi money and all this and the atrocities that they do. GMAC played it really fine in the press conference, saying, you know what, this is not the only place where atrocities happen in the whole world. You know, it's not like this is the only place that you have to look at things going bad, right? And also you can say, hey, everybody does business with the Saudis right now. I mean, it's not like they're banned worldwide right now because they do all these atrocities. The US Saudis are the main partner in the Middle East right now. So if you come to think about it, start talking to the government and tell them, look, stop doing all that business that you do with the Saudis right now, because this atrocity, to me, that's the only thing that I consider like, why don't you go to the government first? And you're taking it on the golfers. They're just contractors. They're just trying to earn their money. And there's other players, there's other places that true, like GMAC is saying, that have happened worse things than this. So is it really, really something there, Fred, towards this morality thing happening?
Yeah, it boils down to me, this whole thing has two problems. Number one is that this money is coming from Saudi Arabia, and they're really trying to do this sports washing. And it's over the top. It's too much. $200 million to Phil Mickelson. That's just 180 or 125 or whatever the hell they paid Dustin Johnson. It's just too much. Okay. It boggles my mind. So I can't, I'm not a big fan of Saudi Arabia for all the stuff that has gone on that's been well documented. But the other part of this thing is that the PGA Tour has been based off generating money for charities. Yes, they pocket a lot of money, okay? And yes, what goes to charity is really not a big percentage of what the overall take is, but it's still a lot of money that goes to charity. And it means a lot in those local communities where these professional golf tournaments go. So I have a problem with both those. And the LIV is not talking about, they're not giving any money to charity. They're going to either keep it in their pocket or whatever, or the golfers are getting it in their pocket. So those are the two things that I have a problem with, Carlos. And I don't know how they're going to solve those for me.
Kieran, how about this? I didn't ask you about the keeping the players out. So if you can summarize about, can Jay Monahan keep the players banned? Is it good that they did this thing about the morality and what Fred just brought in there that ties into it? You know,
Yeah.
because we haven't heard anything about the charitable efforts from LIV. So far, nothing. We do know golf right now is the biggest charitable sports in the world right now. No one is even close about the money that they give to charity worldwide year long. So what do you think about those three things?
Well, I think on the well, to be fair, initially actually on the charitable thing. So last week, LIV Golf did announce £1 million British they were going to donate to benefit local communities in the area in the UK, in particular in the area around the Centurion Club. So they did make some. To be fair, £1 million for them is obviously like $1 falling out your pocket. I mean, it's like nothing for them, but that's what they did, almost like I think it's a gesture. I think probably to actually answer the question that Fred raised there about that was to try and get some positive headlines in there somewhere. Well, we'll give $1 million here for a bit of charity. But of course, when you're giving $1 million for a bit of charity, then you're also paying $500 million on the field that you have of 48 players. It doesn't look very good in comparison. So it's a very much a token gesture. I think that was from the LIV Golf executives. But yeah, on the PGA Tour thing, I think the initial suspension of players, I think, was the right thing to do, because ultimately they did break the PGA Tour tournament regulations, and you have to differentiate between the guys who have broken the rules and the guys who haven't broken the rules. The guys who have broken the rules should have some degree of punishment, because otherwise, what's the point of having rules? Now, long term, I think it is unsustainable to ban these players because they are big name players. Now, whether you like Phil Mickelson or Bryson DeChambeau or Patrick Reed or whoever not always the most popular players on the PGA Tour, but they are big names. They do generate headlines, good and bad.
They are popular. They generate headlines on the bad way.
Yeah, well, that's what it is, isn't it? They generate interest. Whether you like them or not, they generate interest. I mean, Phil Mickelson, for the good bits and the bad bits, he is a compelling character, and he always has been. And he is one of the biggest names that golf has ever had. And to have him essentially banned from the PGA Tour doesn't seem to benefit the tour going forward, because you want to have the biggest name players playing. So I don't think that's a sustainable thing going forward. Of course, we don't know how long these suspensions are. That was never disclosed. We just know they have been suspended for an undetermined amount of time. And I think that was the right thing to do. But going forward, I don't think it makes any sense. And I think it's one of those things that that will have to be addressed. So the other question on the morality, Carlos, we can go into the good and bad of different countries and where guys have played before. The PGA Tours went to China, of course, in the WGCs in China. We can talk about China. We can talk about the DP World Tour going to Qatar and their close relationship with the UAE, obviously in Dubai, and there's some human rights stuff going on there. It's not very nice either. We can talk about all this stuff, but I think the difference here, though, is with and Fred touched on this, with the real sum of money. It's like these guys aren't just doing business with the Saudi Arabians. They're being bought by the Saudi Arabians. They've almost become objects, toys for the Saudi Arabians to play around with. I mean, Graham McDowell last week appeared to become the official spokesman for the whole thing, and you could almost see the strings directing him what to say and what to do. Phil Mickelson at the US Open today, at his press conference, looks like a guy who's lost his soul. He's a guy who always came out there and he was colourful and he was speaking, he would say, imaginative things and he'd be creative. He doesn't really know what to say apart from these very carefully scripted lines that he has been given. As we saw the key points that all the players were given. I think the key words they were supposed to use when they're talking to the press, the key messaging. It was like watching, I don't know, like the West Wing, with the advisors give the politicians, right, you go on TV, you got to say this and say this and say this, say that, don't say this, don't say this, say this. Messaging, very important, be consistent. It's like that too. So these guys aren't just doing business with the Saudi Arabians, which you could argue is unethical on any level, and that includes all different sports, governments, businesses. It's all very questionable, all very murky, but of course the world isn't black and white, it's all very grey. But these guys have almost become little chess pieces bought by the Saudi Arabian government. And I think that is the key difference here. And that's why it is a real turn off to people. But also just the sheer sum of money, I just look at it and think this is unbelievable, where half these golfers who you've never heard of, no one cares about, and they're pocketing millions of dollars for just turning up. There's no competition. There's no meritocracy.
I think it's a really bad look for professional golf.
It's a terrible look.
It just doesn't play well in Peoria.
It doesn't. And the thing is also, Fred, is certainly in the UK, golf doesn't get that much mainstream news coverage. But this story last week was everywhere. It was all over the major news channels, all over all the newspapers, talking about golf in a really negative light, because it really, for people who aren't involved in golf, it kind of reinforced all the stereotypes of all the cliches. Oh, golf's about money. It's about rich people want to become richer. That's exclusive. That's all it's about. And it made all these guys look terrible. And it made the game itself look bad, which, again, is not a positive thing for the game going forward. So I think the sheer sum of money, wherever it came from, whether it came from stockbrokers or Wall Street or whatever, the sheer sum of money itself is something that I find really disgusting.
There's so many things that could have been done with that money instead of giving it to rich golfers.
Oh yeah, guys who are already worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Right. And we talk about growing the game, it's growing their bank balance. That's all it is. Growing, and that's it. And that's, to me, that's why I find it such a difficult thing to embrace, because ultimately, whatever, they can have the best players in the world, they can have the biggest names playing in their events, but they don't really have any meaning. They don't have history. They don't have true competition. They don't have anything iconic about them. Maybe it's a romantic view of the game, what it should be, but ultimately you can buy the best players, but you can't buy meaning. Meaning is earned. And the tour does have that with its venues, with its historic events. The majors obviously have that as well, where yes, the players earn big money for winning big events, but that's never the big story. This is just about guys winning tournaments, No one cares that Charles Schwartz won the first LIV Golf event. Doesn't mean anything. You know, the Canadian Open has much more history than this thing ever will. But he earned all this money, and it's about money. Rich guys getting richer. It's the same thing with the FedEx Cup. I've always had a problem with the FedEx Cup where it has no real historic meaning, because in the end, it's just a contrived format that is just about rewarding already rich golfers with vast riches on top of that. And in the end, the conversation is always about the money, what they earn, the 10 million that they win, and all the bonuses. It's not really about the achievement of winning a title, winning a trophy, winning a green jacket or a claret jug or a Wanamaker trophy, the US Open trophy. It doesn't have that. And that's why you ask the average golf fan, can you name the last 10 winners of the FedEx Cup? They struggle with it because they don't really care. But they can tell you who won the Masters in the last 10 years, who won the Open Championship in the last 10 years. That's meaning. And that's whatever you say about the morality and the money and the players and the format and the shotgun starts and the team thing, ultimately the thing doesn't have meaning. And that's something that cannot be bought. It has to be earned. And the LIV Golf is just fast tracking all of that. And that's why ultimately all you say about it is it's empty, it's soulless, and it's going to, and it never will get that. And that's the one advantage that the PGA Tour does have, is that it does have a legacy, it does have a history and an iconography in terms of the venues, in terms of the players, in terms of the events. And that's the one thing it will always have. And that's what the majors do have more than anything else. And obviously the US Open this week is a great example of that. It's championship golf at its best. And ultimately, championship golf is what it's all about. That's where the game is at its best and always will be. This LIV golf stuff is just a glorified exhibition, frankly. And I just think I don't see any upside for the game as a whole.
I think time, I have to disagree a little bit on there, because you don't start history with your first tournament. You have to give time to things. And you cannot just say this is not going to happen just because of one tournament. There are things that go through time and you start changing things,
yeah,
adapting and doing things to make it more appealing to the people, that we just have to see if it's going to happen or not. Right now, yes, I agree with you. There's no history. It's just the first tournament. There's nothing there. We can't really base history on just one event.
But the thing is, Carlos,
changes coming in.
Yeah, that is true. But the point is, so I'm trying to make is that think of the Open Championship, for example. Obviously, this year, the 150th one, right? It was established way back in 1860, right? To try and identify the best golfer in the world, the best golfer in Scotland. That's what the whole deal was, the champion golfer of the year. That was its purpose. It wasn't about the money, it wasn't even about the trophy, it was about that status. The LIV Golf is just about the money. There's no achievement to winning these events. They don't mean anything. They never will, because ultimately it's about the money, and that is it. There's just nothing about the history is earned, meaning is earned, it can't be bought. And it's like the FedEx Cup, just worse. And that's how I view this thing. Where I don't like the FedEx Cup, I never have, and I feel exactly the same way about this. Just that it's the FedEx Cup on steroids in a really ugly way.
But it's still the same thing. I mean, you cannot say that just is. How are you gonna be if the DP World Tour right now have been trying with the Rolex series to keep their players there? If I just bring the same amount of money, I'm not gonna try to win. I'm never gonna beat the PGA Tour. It's like, if I'm gonna be trying to compete against the great companies, I have to get some investment into it and a lot of money to try to get into a market, which is what they're trying. Okay, that's the way I see it. As a business, I'm trying to penetrate a market. I have no zero penetration right now. So I have to throw a lot of money to try to bring attention to me. Okay, this whole thing is because of who is really fucking the money. It's not that much about the money, because a lot of the people, if you ask out there, most of the fans don't care that they're getting this much money. It's just the unfortunate thing is that is the Saudis who are paying it. If it would have been another one, we wouldn't be even having this discussion. It wouldn't be that much.
But Carlos, I mean, but no other venture, no other country would fund this amount of money into a golf league. The golf is not the world's biggest sport. It's not,
because they don't have the money. They don't have the money
exactly.
to do it.
And that's
the thing. If
and
they
that's
have it, let them use them. That's
well,
the thing.
well, yeah.
It's,
Well, I mean,
in this case, the richer, I understand, but you have to see it that way. That's the reason why no other country does it. If they would have it, they would try to do the same thing.
well,
But they
to be
don't.
fair, I would hope that if any other country had all that money, would try and use the money to actually enhance the facilities and the infrastructure of their own country and trying to improve the lives of the people who actually live in their country and the healthcare system and all this kind of stuff. But that's the whole point, though, is these essentially dictatorships are the only nations now who have the ability to galvanize, financially a nation and the whole nation behind major sporting events. That's why we see the Olympic Games going to Russia, going to China, the Soccer World Cup going to Russia, going to Qatar this year, which is an incredibly controversial event in the winter coming up. Same story, because they have this vast amount of money, because they're not interested in spending it on more practical things. They're interested in using sport as a way to get their foot on the international table. And that's what the Saudis are doing here, as they have done in other sports as well. So, nobody would put billions of dollars into golf. It just wouldn't happen because there's no return to it, no obvious financial return there. And then it'll take a very, very long time for that to ever happen. And that's why you talk about the morality of it. No Wall Street business would do this. No corporation would do it. One, don't have the money to do it anyway, because this is basically an entire nation, country, putting all their riches behind this sort of thing. And that's why it's different, where it's a very unique case because it wouldn't happen elsewhere. And there's a very good reason for that, because one, I don't think it's even moral to spend all this money on any sport, let alone one that ultimately isn't even that popular internationally.
Well, we'll see. Time will tell only what happens here, but let's close this with our last two questions. We already saw the top 20, the first 20 players to do the jump. And we know right now that the Open and the US Open have said, yeah, welcome here. We're sure that the Masters, they're inviting people, but they're not going to say no to Dustin Johnson or no to any of these players. So you can better rest assured that they're going to say yes to any of these players that are there. Still, they're a long way to go. So Fred, what do you think about who's going to be next? So far, we're not surprised about any of the players that are there because we have expected them to be there. But who do we expect maybe to make the jump next? And if you were sitting with Jay Monahan on the table, what would you advise to him to do?
So yeah, Pat Perez just announced that he is going to be playing in Portland along with Reed and DeChambeau. Not a surprise, really. Pat Perez is at the back end of his career, good player, but he's not making cuts and he's not earning any money on the PGA Tour. So if he can get a guarantee, he's gone. The next player, I was just mentioning this to you earlier. I would not be surprised to see Brooks Koepka making a jump. If he can still play in the majors and make more money and play less, and it comes back to playing all year long, Carlos. It's hard on these guys' bodies. We said this a long time ago. This wraparound schedule and all the time, and these guys are swinging hard all the time. It's hard on their body, and injury is an issue for them. And so if they can play less, make more money, why not do it? Well, I think Brooks Koepka, Chase is already there, so he's probably putting the bug in Brooks's ear. Brooks is clear down at I think 84 on the FedEx Cup, so he's not making that much money either right at the minute. So it wouldn't surprise me if Brooks Koepka made the jump.
What do you think?
Oh, and John Rahm also. I would not be surprised to see John Rahm go to the LIV. No, in fact,
I would be very surprised to see John Rahm.
Yeah, the rumor is out there that Rahm is maybe the next one to go.
What do you think, Kieran? Oh, by the way, Fred, you didn't say what would you advise Jay Monahan?
What would I advise Jay Monahan?
Resign, give up.
Yeah, he's in a really tough place. He's trying to enforce the rules that are on the books, just like Kieran said. They got to figure out some way to get a conversation going to get this thing figured out. They need to have some unified scheduling so these tournaments don't conflict with big tournaments, and it looks like the LIV has kind of tried to do that, with some of the lesser tournaments. They didn't compete with the Memorial, they didn't compete with the with the Players, and some of these other big events. They did compete with the RBC. They're going to be competing again against a tournament when they play in Portland, but it's the lesser tournaments. It's not the big ones. So he's got to find a way to have a conversation and make this thing work. It's not going away. He's got to find a way to make it work.
So how about you, Kieran? Who you think would make the jump next, and what would you tell Jay Monahan?
Well, I mean, obviously it's speculation as to who the guys will be. I think we can certainly say it won't be Rory McIlroy. I think he's the one guy we've got. We've always got Rory. That's it. I'm on team Rory. But ultimately, guys will go. There will be more players because it's inevitable, because it's not going away. The money will still be there. I do think we'll see it'll quieten down, though, I think, for the rest of this year a little bit. I think the big jumps we've seen have already occurred. However, once the FedEx Cup is completed in September, once the big money's paid out there, the season's effectively over, the guys don't have to worry about being suspended then I think we'll see the next wave of players sign up for the coming season in LIV Golf in 2023. Who that will be, we'll wait and see, but it will certainly be top players, maybe even some of the guys that Fred just speculated on there, but it will happen. And in terms of Jay Monahan, right now he has to kind of separate himself from the emotion of the whole subject, because that will not get him anywhere in the long run, because it doesn't change the reality of it, of where we are. But he has to understand that his product must evolve. PGA Tour cannot remain the same as it is right now. It has to change. It has to bring in more diversity in terms of formats, in terms of events, mix things up a little bit. You cannot compete financially with the Saudi Arabians. That obviously is clear. No one could. But he has the legacy and the history on his side. Use that. Make the tour younger, what I said earlier. Make the pathways from the college system, the Corn Ferry Tour, up to the PGA Tour. Make it financially easier. Make it more accessible. Make the game younger. New players every year. Bring these young guys onto the big tour and have a greater turnover of players. Make it exciting. Freshen up a little bit. Give fewer guaranteed cars. Don't give the guy ranked 124 another exemption for another year. What's he offering you? Nothing. Give it to some young guy, and recognize that things can and they should evolve. Both these things will evolve. Ultimately, the bottom line is PGA Tour is not going anywhere. LIV Golf isn't going anywhere either. So there will have to be some degree of coexistence in the years to come. They will have to kind of deal with each other. It's a bit like the Cold War, back in the day with the US and Russia. It's that kind of thing. They will have to exist in some fashion, and maybe collaboration is a bit of a stretch, but accommodate each other, I think, is more realistic. Now, there's a lot of hurt here right now, a lot of kind of anger, a lot of noise. So it might take a few years to get to that stage, but I think long term, that will be the reality where these two things do kind of exist in the same universe in some fashion, whether we like it or not. But I do think the journey to that place is going to be a very bumpy one, a lot of turbulence, and this story is going to go on and on and on. And yeah, it's just an extraordinary week for golf. And I think it's going to begin the first step of what's going to be an extraordinary story, one with a lot of negative connotations, but it will dominate the headlines for a long time to come.
Yes, buckle up and brace yourselves, because this has just started. And like Kieran says, I believe definitely this is a few years down the road, but Jay, start picking up the phone right now and let the emotions get out of the way. But anyway, we could still do this for a few more hours. There's a lot of things that we have left out, which we can still debate about. And I know that you guys also would like to see that. So maybe in the future we will. As soon as we get more information, we'll definitely bring it up to you as to who I think is going to be next. Ricky Fowler is the obvious one that I think is going to be the next one. I doubt about John Ram at this time. I think it would be maybe longer down the road. Brooks Koepka, I got it with you. I even though he's the guy that lives for the majors, his body's really not responding how it should be. So I think he should take the money and let's just do it right now. So anyway, thank you for joining us. It's always our pleasure to bring you the latest in the world of golf news and information. Remember to subscribe to our channel. The description right there, right down there is the link. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again soon.